Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Welcome to Nevada Newsmakers. I'm Paul Enos, CEO of the Nevada Trucking Association, and today we are going to be talking energy and energy justice with Daivd Holt, the president of the Consumer Energy Alliance. That's next on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers.
Pro Group Management is the place where companies can find workers' comp solutions that are designed to meet their specific business requirements. As regulations evolve, Pro Group takes a proactive approach to clear the path to make sure your business stays ahead of the curve. Knowing your workers' comp program is optimized, you can focus on other important matters related to your growing business. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
This is Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad, a no-holds-barred political forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
Welcome back to Nevada Newsmakers. We are here with my friend, Daivd Holt. He is the president of the Consumer Energy Alliance. And, you know, Dave, energy is what is driving a lot of what we're seeing in the economy right now. I'd say it's the main driver of inflation. Talk to us a little bit about the Consumer Energy Alliance, which, full disclosure, Nevada Trucking Association is a proud member, and what your mission is.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. Good to be with you. Consumer Energy Alliance is now a 17-year-old national trade association that really focuses on what energy and energy policy and environmental policy mean for the entire economy. So it's transportation, it's trucking, it's the farming community, it's organized labor, it's small businesses, it's large businesses, it's families. So we have about 550,000 individual members all across the country. We have about 380 corporate members, including, as you said, the Nevada Trucking Association. So we're really out there talking to policymakers and in different parts of the economy about what energy policies mean to them, what it means to our pocketbook, what it means to us and our ability to meet payroll on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, our ability to make kind of ends meet, and how are we meeting our energy and environmental needs. And our mission, Paul, really is to say, you know what, we can do both. We can continue use of oil and natural gas while we remove carbon and improve emissions across the board. We can walk and chew gum essentially at the same time in this country. We don't need to ban anything. We support wind, we support nuclear, we support solar, we support oil and natural gas, and we support environmental improvement. So it really puts us right in the center of the U.S. policy debates. We are obviously very concerned about affordable, reliable, and environmentally responsible energy. We're seeing a lot of discussion on the environmental responsible energy. We're very excited about that. But we have lost sight here in this country a little bit on affordable and reliable, and we need to make sure we balance those things out. So we're real happy to work with you and the Nevada Trucking Association. Really happy to be on this call, on the show today.
So, Dave, I look at what's going on, really not just in America, but around the world, and it seems like we're getting a lot of our energy policy wrong. And that does have impacts, here in the Silver State, right? Their largest border is with California, where, last week, or maybe it's 2 weeks ago now, CARB announced they're going to ban the sales of gas-powered vehicles in 13 years by 2035. And then a few days later, announcements that there were rolling blackouts. So, basically everybody was getting a notice, hey, don't charge your electric vehicle, put your thermostat at 78 degrees, turn off lights, that I say, okay, so they want you to stay at home and sweat in the dark, was really the message that seemed to be coming out of the utility. I think we're getting a lot of our policy wrong today. Where can we do better?
Across the board, we really need to take a hard look. I agree with you. I think our energy policy is fundamentally broken. I think we're looking at energy policy kind of with rose-colored glasses, if you will. There's this rush to seemingly try to eliminate fossil energy, which oil and natural gas, which supplies more than 80% of the world's energy is supplied by oil and natural gas. So this rush in 5 years, in 8 years, in 15 years, in 20 years to eliminate oil and natural gas is a fallacy in our view. It's not possible, and it's really not the right approach. We can continue to meet our environmental goals and exceed our environmental goals in many ways without eliminating fossil energy. So this rush to ban gasoline powered cars, as you say, and other states are looking to follow California's lead. So I've seen some estimates where as many as 100 million cars in various states will be impacted, vehicles in various states. So it could eliminate the opportunity to purchase up to 100 million gasoline powered vehicles if you look at it that way. That energy, that electricity has to come from somewhere. And if we're going to add wind and solar to the mix, we're going to have to triple, if not quadruple, the amount of transmission lines we have in this country. So that brings up right-of-way issues. It brings up view shed issues. You're going to see a lot more transmission line in your backyard. It brings up eminent domain issues, how we're going to get these transmission lines built. It also brings up things like nuclear, which we haven't really had in this country a real robust conversation about nuclear energy in a long time. And you cannot get there without the use of nuclear energy. We have to have nuclear energy. And now with what's called small modular reactors, which are smaller and you can place them in communities and they can power hundreds of thousands of homes in a smaller way with a smaller footprint. Really interesting and available technology that we can deploy today. It also brings up how we continue to use oil and natural gas in this country and why we have to continue to use oil and natural gas in this country. All these things play into the point that you made. 3 days after announcing we're going to go all electric vehicles, they say just don't charge your electric vehicles. That's a problem. That's a fundamental disconnect that policymakers have in this country. I'm calling you from the Gulf Coast. I live in Houston, Texas. There's a lot of EV use here in Houston, Texas as well. And one of the things I worry about is if we have a big weather event where we have to evacuate and you have all these EVs on the road with a 250 to 300 mile limit, what happens? Are you going to be running out of power in those situations? So there's a lot of policy considerations that we're racing toward without fully considering the implications of just the power side. And then you have the affordability side. You're looking at the increased cost. So the average cost, the low end cost for an EV is about $50,000. I don't know about you, but I don't know a lot of folks can afford a $50,000 car that they're required to purchase. High end, it's $200,000. Who's going to buy that? So you're forcing higher prices onto folks on fixed incomes, folks at the poverty level, folks that are retirees, that are on a military budget, folks that just really can't afford to pay these higher prices. So what we talk about at Consumer Energy Alliance is energy justice. You know, how are we going to meet our energy needs in a just and equitable way that these different parts of the economy, these different demographics, these different communities are also allowed the opportunity to afford reliable energy. It also sets up a situation that you have more brownouts or blackouts. So we've seen literally 25 states this year announce the possibility of brownouts, if not blackouts. California, of course, is leading the way in that regard. So if we're going to be rushing toward the elimination of oil and natural gas, toward electrification, what does that mean for grid reliability? What does that mean for our ability to turn on the lights and have something happen? Turn on our electricity to power our air conditioner or our heat, so that folks, again, seniors and those on fixed incomes aren't put in life-threatening situations where there's, you know, really hot days or really cold days and they're not able to meet the power needs that they have. So brings up a lot of questions that I don't think as a society, as policymakers, we've really effectively answered, which leads us back to your point. Our policy's broken.
100% agree with you. We are here with Daivd Holt. He is the president of the Consumer Energy Alliance, and we are going to be right back with him on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers.
Retail's impact on Nevada's economy? Enormous. 8,600 businesses, large and small.
employing 145,000 workers. And last fiscal year, retail paid tax on nearly $60 billion in sales. We're the Retail Association of Nevada. We support retail, we help it grow, and we mean business.
RANNV.org.
What do you count on? You count on your power every day. At NV Energy, we've always powered what's important to you, but we're not looking at the past. We're focused on the future. While our standards are high, our rates will remain low. And our commitment to renewables isn't just meeting standards, but leading the way. Because you can count on more than just your power. You can count on the company who brings it to you. That's our promise. You can count on it.
Modern boutique Ahern Hotel and Events Center in Las Vegas. Host meetings and events on 2 floors. Stay in luxurious rooms and suites. Unlimited branding opportunities. Regional Italian cuisine by Chef Mark Segrisi. Flexible event spaces. Full buyout options. Visit ahernhotel.com today.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
Welcome back to Nevada Newsmakers. We are here with Daivd Holt. He is the president of the Consumer Energy Alliance. David, you talked about energy justice. You know, something that I've heard a lot in the last few years is, a concept of environmental justice. Folks saying, hey, because of increased pollution from fossil fueled vehicles, it's typically your people on the lower socioeconomic strata who are hit harder by climate change or by pollution. And, energy justice seems it's like on the flip side of that.
It really is. They're opposite sides of the same coin, if you will. And you're exactly right. I think many politicians now are looking at this notion of environmental justice, and that includes all the things you mentioned, plus where industrial projects are sited, where they're located. Are they located in poorer communities? Are they located in communities that of color? Are they located in communities that have disadvantages? Right. So let's make sure that we are looking at it from an equitable standpoint, and that's a word we hear a lot too. Equity. We need to make sure we're being fair to all communities in all these considerations. I think that's a really good notion. It matters, and we should start looking at things in that regard. But too often, and actually, I haven't heard many groups talk about this. There is an energy justice aspect to all this. So if your policy is to intentionally increase the cost of gasoline, if your policy is to intentionally increase the cost of diesel or electricity, then those in these certain demographics, those in these communities, those that are on fixed incomes, those that are living at or near the poverty level, they're disproportionately impacted by higher energy prices. So that has to be a consideration when we're looking at everything in this equity kind of mindset. And too often, I'm not hearing that these same elected officials that are talking about environmental justice, they tend to either ignore or they haven't properly considered the energy justice aspect to this. And again, as we mentioned earlier, if your policy is to require the purchase of electric vehicles, or your policy is to require that folks cannot buy natural gas powered water heaters or natural gas powered stoves or washer dryers and things like that, but you have to purchase electric appliances. Those appliances, according to studies that we've looked at, could cost $25,000 more per household. So you're requiring that additional cost on parts of our society that simply cannot afford these things. So we need to take a step back, make sure we look at all these associated costs with everything, while we continue to expand the use of solar and wind and renewables, which are all great things. We need to do those things. We need to diversify our energy portfolio, and we're strong supporters of wind and solar. It just needs to be done in a way that we fully recognize and appreciate the impacts on price and reliability. And we have to do it in a smart way. And too often right now, I think we're rushing to a conclusion that we want without looking at all the ramifications of what that does to society.
Now, and I agree. I mean, I know we're talking about falling fuel prices right now. You know, that it's getting cheaper at the pump, but it's still expensive. You know, it's still a hardship on, you know, a family that is having to drive to get to their job or drive to take their kids to school. So, you know, we're really in a weird place. And, you know, I know the Inflation Reduction Act, that's supposed to bring down the price of energy. What do you see from what Congress did? Do you think that is helping bring down the price, or do you think this is just one of those politicians, hey, look here, don't look here?
No, that's a great question, and it kind of does a little bit of both. You know, the fundamentals around high gasoline and diesel prices right now are the same, and so we think that the gasoline and diesel prices are more likely to go up than they are to come down quite a bit. We are not producing enough oil and natural gas here in this country. There's been essentially a moratoria on leasing for oil and natural gas in this country, both offshore and onshore, since the current administration took office. There's been a slowdown in permitting for oil and natural gas. We are still lagging behind construction of pipelines to deliver oil and natural gas to markets where they need to go. We're lagging behind actually in transmission lines for wind and solar and renewables, frankly, we're in getting that power where it needs to go. So we also have the geopolitical situation that we're seeing in Ukraine, which is impacting obviously Europe and our ability to help our friends and neighbors in Europe with exporting natural gas so that they can meet their basic needs. You know, we have winter coming up. What is Europe going to do with a situation where they just cannot get the energy molecules that they need to warm their homes? How are we going to help that? As energy prices go up here at home, what are we going to do to meet our fundamental needs, again, from an energy justice standpoint, like we've talked about? So all these things go into play that I don't think the Inflation Reduction Act really addressed. Now, long term, they did do some good things in the IRA, like helping to move forward on carbon mitigation and technologies to help us sequester carbon, which will help us meet our carbon reduction goals in this country. You know, that's going to help companies large and small, from the iron and steel industry to refineries to big manufacturers, capture and sequester and store permanently their carbon emissions, which will help the United States continue to lead the world in environmental performance. And frankly, the United States leads the world today in environmental performance. We are the #1 environmental performing country in the world, not only for carbon reductions, but for smog producing emissions like volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxides and all the rest. So the air in this country is getting much cleaner. We're doing a good job, but there's more to be done.
And, you know, hey, I'm going to take a little credit, you know, with the trucking industry. You know, when you look at a truck that was produced in 1988, the emissions from that one truck in 1988 equals 60 today. So, hey, I got to give the trucking industry a little credit for reducing that environmental footprint, getting more efficient. We are talking energy and the environment with Daivd Holt. He is the president of the Consumer Energy Alliance, and we're going to be right back on Nevada Newsmakers.
It's the $85,000 football frenzy at Tamarack Casino, with up to $15,000 in weekly cash and free play giveaways, and $25,000 in grand prize giveaways Thursday, September 29th. Your good times are at Tamarack Casino during the $85,000 football frenzy.
The Nevada Builders Alliance has been protecting the interests of the construction industry for over 50 years.
Our programs save members thousands of dollars every year and allow them to provide much-needed benefits to their employees. Our industry also allows Nevada to grow. If you're thinking about a career in the construction industry, reach out. And if you haven't thought of a career in construction, what are you waiting for? We are the Nevada Builders Alliance.
It's the $250,000 Progressive Windfall of Cash at Carson Valley Inn. Weekly Progressives could accumulate up to $35,000 in cash and $20,000 in guaranteed grand prize giveaways. It's the $250,000 Progressive Windfall of Cash at the Carson Valley Inn.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
Welcome back on Nevada Newsmakers. We are here with Daivd Holt. He is the president of the Consumer Energy Alliance. Dave, I want to talk a little bit about the supply and demand. When I started this job, there was a worry that by 2020 there was not going to be enough oil. We are talking about scenarios like peak oil. Do we have enough oil today to meet our needs? Is there enough of the resource available? And or is it really that we're just not going after what is there?
We have it, and we're not going after it. And we have it, and we can produce it more efficiently, more safely, and more environmentally responsibly than we ever have before. So not only do we have it here in the United States, but globally. And we also have natural gas. We have natural gas supplies for some estimates now 200 years. So, the abundant opportunities for oil and natural gas exists. It's just leasing and permitting and the politics around oil and natural gas are such that it's making it more and more difficult, more and more expensive, and frankly, a little less responsible in our policy because it's less transparent, it's less predictable, it's less kind of forthright in how we're meeting our energy needs from the dominant global energy resource. It's great that we're continuing to expand wind and solar and renewables, but they continue to only meet about 10% of global energy supply and about 10% of US energy supply. So demand keeps going up while we increase our renewable portfolio, and it's just kind of keeping pace. So we haven't diminished our need and our reliance on oil and natural gas at all over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And we're not projected to diminish our reliance and need for oil and natural gas over the next 10, 20, 25 years. It's really not making much difference here. And we need to recognize that the way to do this is continue innovation, continue technology, continue to make sure we're using the best technology to do it as cleanly and efficiently as possible so that we're meeting our energy needs and our environmental goals at the same time. And we can do both. Those groups out there that say you have to make this choice, you have to ban fossil energy, you have to ban oil and natural gas, they're not correct. And not only are they not correct, it's not possible. It's not going to happen. So we have to change the conversation to say, how can we meet our energy needs and our environmental goals? And we can do both at the same time.
When I look at it, just kind of my basic ELCO education, it's really a supply and demand issue, right? We still have demand, but that supply is being diminished. And, we're seeing it happen right before our very eyes in places like Europe, where energy has become, one of those weapons that Russia has and is using against the West.
You're exactly right. The big fear here. So we put all these sanctions on Putin to say, you've started this conflict in the Ukraine, so we're going to punish you. Well, he's making more money on oil and natural gas now than he ever has before, selling it to our friends in China and elsewhere in Eastern countries, while he's just waiting for what he hopes, I would assume, is a very harsh European winter when he's cut off natural gas supplies to kind of use that as a war leverage against the West. And if we have a harsh winter in Europe, what do? That's going to present a very big dilemma for our friends and allies in Europe on what they do and how they react, and whether or not these Western sanctions on Russia are allowed to continue. And I think that's what Vladimir Putin's kind of waiting on to see if we blink.
Dave, we've seen all of these hashtags, from the beginning of the Ukraine war. And hey, we did see fuel prices go up, fairly staggering when Russia invaded Ukraine. And it was, hey, this is Putin's price hike. But we've actually seen those prices increasing and increasing. Is that because of how difficult it is to go out and start new drilling, start new expansion, move that product more efficiently through pipelines?
Yeah, I think, listen, the day one of the Biden administration, they stopped the Keystone pipeline. Day two, essentially, figuratively, they stopped leasing in the Gulf of Mexico. They've slowed down leasing onshore for oil and natural gas all over this country. So they came into office with a stated antagonistic view toward oil and natural gas, and they've lived up to that campaign promise, essentially. But the Putin price hike is a misnomer in my view, because 50% of the price of gasoline and diesel had already gone up 50% before Putin announced the invasion of Ukraine, and it's been another 50% or so since. Now prices have come down a little bit since then, but the vast majority of the price increase that's remaining had occurred before the Ukraine situation began. So those fundamentals on lack of supply here in this country, on lack of consistent regulatory environment for this country for producers of oil and natural gas, the slowdown in our permitting for transmission, the slowdown in permitting for pipelines of all sorts, that's led largely to the price increases that we see today. Ukraine just complicated that situation. So, those fundamentals still exist. And that's why I continue to say we're more likely to see significant price increases than we are to see significant price declines.
So, Dave, last question. You talked about a stable regulatory environment. What does this kind of thing do to future investment in things like refineries, in oil and natural gas development, in pipelines, the kind of regulatory environment now? Is it conducive to more investment in fossil fuels, or are we seeing those folks back away?
It's such a good question, and that's a fundamental part of this whole thing. You're seeing investment dry up. You're seeing investment go away from the oil and gas industry, the long-term fundamental foundational energy supply that we have in this country, because there's actually federal regulations around SEC regulations around funding for oil and gas development. You're seeing big, large investment houses and banks that are reluctant now more so than ever to invest in large scale oil and natural gas projects. So because of this regulatory environment that has been created over time, it is impacting our ability to meet our energy needs going forward. And we're going to meet our energy needs. The question is, at what cost? How much do people have to pay? And then that brings us back to that whole energy justice notion that we talked about earlier. If we're intentionally increasing costs, whether it's through the regulatory environment, whether it's through investment climate because of the regulatory environment, those of us that can least afford to pay for energy are going to be the most impacted.
Hey, Dave, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you so much. Always appreciate having you on. Always appreciate talking to you. I always learn something. We're going to be right back. Oh, thank you very much. We're going to be right back on Nevada Newsmakers.
Your good times are at Tamarack Casino during the $85,000 football frenzy.
Nevada Newsmakers Studio is located at the headquarters of the Nevada Trucking Association. Motion and purpose are a truck's greatest virtue.
You can watch Nevada Newsmakers at nevadanewsmakers.com 24/7. Thanks for watching.